Right now, hidden inside you, there is a temple. Not one made of stone, not one built by human hands, but one that has been with you since the moment you were born. For thousands of years, mystics and seekers spoke of a single phrase, a sacred phrase, that could open this temple and awaken the power within it. It was hidden in myths, encrypted in symbols, whispered only to the initiated, because those who carried it knew its force could change everything. Imagine a word that doesn't just touch your mind, but vibrates through your heart, your breath, your very cells, until you feel yourself reconnecting to something greater than you've ever known. Tonight you'll hear that phrase. You'll see why it was concealed, how it works, and what happens when you finally speak it. This is not just a story, it's an initiation. From the beginning of recorded time, human beings have whispered of a hidden power woven not into monuments of stone or treasures of gold, but into the very fabric of language itself. Ancient cultures that never met, separated by oceans and centuries, carried the same idea. Somewhere there exists a phrase so sacred that to speak it is to rearrange the substance of reality itself. It was not poetry or metaphor to them. It was literal. They believed sound is not merely heard but felt, not only vibrations in the air but vibrations in the soul. And at the heart of these mysteries lies the promise that a single phrase could open the doorway to what mystics called the inner temple, that deepest sanctuary within, where the self meets the infinite. You see fragments of this idea scattered like shards of an ancient mirror. The Egyptian priests wrote of the secret names of Ra, hidden syllables of power that even the gods feared, because whoever spoke them could command the forces of existence. In the Vedas of India, the rishis declared that the primordial sound Om was the seat of the cosmos, and that hidden beyond its threefold resonance lay a silence that contained eternity. The early Gnostics spoke of passwords needed to pass through celestial gates, each phrase a vibration that harmonized the soul with higher realms. Even the Hebrew mystics whispered of a name so holy that to pronounce it was forbidden, a tetragrammaton whose true sound was reserved for the temple's innermost sanctum. Why such secrecy? If words are simply words, why would cultures guard them with such ferocity? The answer is that words are not neutral. They are containers of energy, frequencies dressed in symbols, and when spoken with precision, they alter the state of the one who utters them. The ancients believed this so strongly that entire schools of initiation were built not around books, but around syllables. A candidate might spend years in silence, purifying themselves, not to learn volumes of text, but to be granted one phrase that could ignite the chamber within. Imagine this for a moment. The greatest treasure of the mystery schools was not a scroll, not a jewel, not a temple relic, but a sound carried not by stone or papyrus, but by living breath. A sound that survived only as long as it was spoken, handed from teacher to student like fire passed between candles, fragile yet eternal. The guardians of this fire knew that if it were handed recklessly to the unprepared, it could consume rather than illuminate. Because the phrase is not a toy, it is a key. And keys open doors. Some doors lead to light, others to shadows. Even in our modern world, this ancient truth reveals itself if you pay attention. Consider the word abracadabra. For most of us, it is the language of stage magicians and childhood fairy tales. But the root of the word comes from Aramaic, avra kedabra, meaning I create as I speak. Hidden inside a nursery word is the entire doctrine of sacred sound. Or think of the countless myths where heroes must utter a password to open a hidden chamber. Open sesame in Arabian tales. Or the magical words spoken by shamans to cross into spirit worlds. These are not accidents of folklore. They are echoes of the same memory, a cultural residue of something once known universally, that words, especially the right words, are instruments of creation. And what of our own lives? Have you ever noticed how a single sentence, spoken at the right time, can change the course of your existence? A teacher says, "I believe in you," and suddenly you glimpse a future you thought impossible. A loved one whispers, "I forgive you." and years of shame dissolve in an instant. On the darker side, a cruel phrase from childhood can haunt for decades, shaping your choices and self-perception without you even realizing. Words are not just tools of description. They are forces that sculpt reality inside us. If ordinary words have such power, imagine the potency of a phrase deliberately designed to align with the deepest architecture of your consciousness. That is the sacred phrase. But here's where the mystery intensifies. The sacred phrase was never static. It adapted to the culture it passed through, clothed itself in the language of the times, concealed in myths and prayers so that it would not be lost even when civilizations collapsed. It may have sounded different in Egypt than in India, different in Sumer than in Greece, but always it carried the same vibrational essence. That essence is like a code, a frequency pattern that resonates not with your outer ears, but with the chambers of your inner temple. The words you hear are the surface. The vibration they awaken is the key. Science, without intending to, has begun to rediscover what the ancients already practiced. In the field of cymatics, when sound waves are played through sand or water, they form geometric patterns, often resembling the same sacred geometries carved into temple walls or encoded into mandalas. Each frequency creates a specific shape, as though sound is the invisible architect of form. In laboratories, researchers found that DNA strands respond to specific frequencies, unwinding or repairing themselves under certain resonances. Imagine what happens when a phrase, crafted from ancient knowledge of vibration, is spoken with intention not into sand or cells, but into the temple of your consciousness. The phrase becomes the architect, reshaping your perception, opening hidden chambers, reorganizing your inner world. The guardians of this knowledge understood that not everyone should be given the key freely. Consider how dangerous it would be if the masses could open their inner temples without preparation. Institutions of power would lose control, hierarchies would crumble, and individuals would become sovereign. This is why the myth of the lost word recurs in so many secret traditions. In Masonic lore, the word was lost with the death of the master builder, to be rediscovered only by those who reconstruct the temple within themselves. In Christian mysticism, Christ is called the Logos, the Word made flesh, implying that the ultimate phrase is not external but embodied. In Taoist teachings, the secret sound is hidden in breath itself, not to be spoken loudly but to be felt in resonance with the cosmos. We live in a strange paradox. The sacred phrase is hidden, yet it surrounds us. It is whispered in lullabies, chanted in prayers, encoded in children's rhymes. We overlook it because it wears disguises, because its power is not in intellectual recognition but in vibrational experience. One could read it written plainly on a page and feel nothing. But when spoken with the right intention, in the right state, it transforms. That is why initiation was required. Not because the phrase was complicated, but because you had to become the instrument tuned to its note. Consider the temple of the body itself. In every tradition, the body is described as a sanctuary, a house of spirit. In Egypt, the body mirrored the architecture of the pyramid, each chamber aligned with specific functions. In yoga, the chakras are the gates of the temple, each responding to sound vibrations. In Kabbalah, the Sephiroth map not just the cosmos, but the structure of human consciousness. The sacred phrase was the universal key, the vibration that aligned all gates and led directly to the innermost chamber. And here is where the hidden brilliance lies. The phrase is not given to you, it is awakened in you. It may arrive as a word, but what it truly ignites is recognition. When you speak it, you are not adding something foreign, you are remembering something you already carry. The phrase does not impose, it reveals. It turns your attention inward to the temple that has always been there, waiting behind the noise of ordinary life. The ancients warned that once the phrase is spoken in its fullness, there is no turning back. The inner temple, once opened, cannot be closed again. You cannot unknow the silence it reveals. You cannot unsee the patterns of reality it unveils. This is why the phrase was never sold cheaply, why it was never written in plain letters for the curious. It is not entertainment, it is initiation, and the moment you engage with it, life will demand more of you. Because once the temple opens, you begin to live not as a seeker, but as one who has entered. If you think of history as a great tapestry, you begin to notice that certain threads repeat themselves. Kingdoms rise and fall, empires come and go. Yet the whisper of a hidden phrase returns again and again, as though humanity itself cannot forget it. Even when it is deliberately buried, it rises in another place, clothed in new garments, waiting for those with eyes to see and ears to hear. The pharaohs guarded it inside hieroglyphs and initiation rites. The druids of the forests passed it through chants and poetic riddles. The shamans of the Americas sang it in medicine songs. Buddhist monks coded it into mantras that to this day ripple across Himalayan valleys. Always hidden, always present, like a secret heartbeat beneath the surface of the world. Why? Because the phrase was never property. It was not owned by a priesthood, though priesthoods tried to hoard it. It was not invented by any single culture. It was discovered the way a scientist discovers a natural law. Gravity belongs to no one, yet all can feel it. The sacred phrase is like that, a universal constant, a resonance that is built into the fabric of consciousness itself. Once one civilization stumbled across it, others could rediscover it by different paths. And so it has followed us through time, indestructible, always waiting. There are stories, half legend, half fact, of seekers who spent lifetimes chasing the phrase. Alchemists in medieval Europe wrote cryptic treatises about the word of transformation. Mystics in deserts and mountains fasted and prayed until the syllables appeared in visions. Sufis spoke of the hidden word planted in the heart of each person by the divine, a word that, if uncovered, leads to the highest union. Time and again, across languages and religions, the same theme appears. A phrase exists that is not learned but remembered, not acquired but awakened. The tragedy, of course, is how often this knowledge was twisted for control. Rulers and institutions discovered long ago that words could shape people's minds just as surely as armies could control their bodies. If the sacred phrase could open the inner temple and grant individuals sovereignty, then counterfeit phrases could enslave them. Propaganda, dogma, empty chants repeated without understanding, all these are shadows of the true power. Instead of awakening the temple, they close its doors, binding people in illusions. You can see this everywhere. Slogans repeated until they override independent thought. Creeds recited without comprehension. Phrases turned into weapons instead of keys. This is the shadow of sacred language. The manipulation of resonance for domination. But the original teaching is not about enslavement. It is about liberation. Those who guarded the phrase were not hiding it out of cruelty but out of reverence. They knew that when someone was ready, the phrase would find them. It might come through a teacher, through a dream, through a moment of deep silence when the veil thins. It cannot be forced. It arrives like a seed that falls into fertile soil, sprouting when the conditions are right. And when it does, the transformation is undeniable. Imagine walking into a vast cathedral. The outside world is noisy, crowded, full of distractions. But the moment you step inside, the acoustics change. The air itself feels different. Every sound echoes, every whisper lingers. Your heart slows, your breath deepens. This is what the sacred phrase does within you. It shifts the resonance of your consciousness so dramatically that even the ordinary seems transfigured. Suddenly you notice patterns in your thoughts, synchronicities in your experiences, an expanded sense of presence. The temple has opened. You have not traveled anywhere physically, yet everything feels more spacious, more alive. This is why ancient texts describe initiates as reborn. It was not about physical rebirth, but about resonance. The old identity, the ego self bound to fear and habit, could not survive the phrase. Something new emerged in its place, a consciousness aligned to the inner temple. Those who experienced it often described a strange paradox. On one hand, they felt more themselves than ever before, as though they had finally remembered who they truly were. On the other hand, they felt dissolved, as though the small self had vanished into something vast and unspeakable. Both are true. The phrase does not erase you, it reveals the part of you that was hidden. Modern people, conditioned by scientific materialism, may scoff at the idea of words holding such power. Yet consider this. Every thought you have is a phrase. Your internal dialogue, that constant stream of sentences running through your head, shapes your reality. When you wake up and think, "Today will be terrible," your body responds with stress hormones before anything even happens. When you say, "I can handle this," your nervous system shifts into resilience. If ordinary self-talk can alter your biology, why should it be strange that a phrase carefully crafted by generations of mystics could unlock profound transformation? The most interesting discoveries today in neuroscience support this. Studies on mantra meditation show that repeating even simple syllables reduces activity in the default mode network, the part of the brain associated with ego and rumination. Brain scans of monks chanting reveal synchrony across regions of the brain, producing coherence rarely seen in ordinary states. Some researchers suggest that certain sounds trigger vagus nerve stimulation, which calms the body and enhances clarity. What the ancients knew through practice, science is beginning to measure. Words and sounds rewire consciousness. And yet the sacred phrase is more than a mantra. It is not simply repetition, it is alignment. To speak it is to step into harmony with something larger than the self, a resonance that has existed long before language and will exist long after. It is the recognition that language is not just human invention, but part of the fabric of creation. The phrase is a bridge between sound and silence, between form and formlessness. It carries you to the threshold where the temple door opens, not outward, but inward. There are clues everywhere once you start to look. Think of how many traditions speak of a name that cannot be spoken aloud, or a word that once uttered changes everything. The Jewish mystics hinted that the true name of God contained 72 syllables, each vibrating with cosmic power. The Gnostics described passwords given by higher beings to ascend through celestial realms. In Tibetan Buddhism, certain mantras are said to invoke the presence of enlightened beings directly, as though the sound itself is the being. Even in our modern culture, superheroes gain power by saying a word: Shazam, Shambhala. Krypton's secrets echoes of the ancient memory. It is almost as though humanity cannot let go of the story, because deep down, it remembers. And what of you? If the sacred phrase exists, if it has traveled through centuries hidden in plain sight, what does that mean for your own journey? It means that the temple within you is not a metaphor. It is real. It means that access is not through dogma, not through intermediaries, but through resonance. It means the phrase is closer than you think, waiting not in some distant monastery, but in the chambers of your own awareness. The question is not whether it exists, but whether you are listening. The danger is that many will dismiss it as superstition. Others will chase it for the wrong reasons, seeking power, control, spectacle. That is why the Guardians were cautious. The phrase is not a magic trick. It will not give you riches or make you superior. It will open you, and in doing so, it will demand humility. Those who approach it with ego will find their illusions stripped away. Those who approach with sincerity will discover the temple they have carried all along. And so we return to the paradox. The phrase is hidden, yet it cannot be lost. It is protected, yet always available. It requires preparation, yet belongs to all. It has been spoken in deserts, forests, cathedrals, caves, whispered in dying breaths and sung in ecstatic chants. It has outlived kings and empires, waiting patiently, because the temple it opens is eternal. Now we stand at a moment in history where secrecy is no longer the only option. The age of initiation by hidden brotherhoods is fading. Humanity is awakening collectively, and the phrase is emerging again, not as property of a select few, but as a birthright of all. But here is the truth. Even if it were shouted from rooftops, only those ready would hear it. Because the phrase is not just sound, it is recognition, it is resonance. And when it finds you, you will know, not because someone convinced you, but because the temple door will open, and you will step inside. When you hear the phrase, inner temple, it can sound poetic, like a metaphor for peace or imagination. But the mystics who spoke of it were not being poetic. They meant something quite literal. Inside the human being exists a structure invisible to ordinary eyes, yet as real as bones and organs. It is a temple of consciousness, layered, precise, and astonishingly consistent across traditions. Every culture described it differently, yet the essence is the same. Within you are chambers, gates, altars, and a central sanctum. The sacred phrase is the resonance that opens the door into this architecture. Think of your body as both an instrument and a cathedral. The bones form the foundation. The muscles and organs are the walls and chambers. The nervous system is the wiring, and the mind is the choir singing within. Every thought, every emotion, every breath is a note played on this instrument. Most of the time, the orchestra is chaotic, out of tune, producing noise instead of harmony. But the sacred phrase is like a tuning fork. When struck, it brings the entire system into resonance, aligning each part with a greater whole. Suddenly, the scattered choir unites into a single hymn. That hymn is what mystics call illumination. Science offers us language to describe what mystics experience directly. The human brain, for example, is not static. It is plastic, rewiring itself constantly in response to thought, emotion, and environment. Neural pathways strengthen with repetition. This means every phrase you repeat, whether "I can't do this" or "I am capable," literally shapes your brain. The sacred phrase takes advantage of this plasticity, not by brute repetition, but by precision. It carries a frequency that interacts with deep structures of the brain, particularly the thalamus, the hippocampus, and the pineal gland. These are not just anatomical curiosities. They are gateways of perception. The thalamus is the relay station of sensory information, deciding what reaches your conscious awareness. Normally, it filters ruthlessly, allowing only a fraction of reality to enter your perception. But under certain vibrations, its filtering loosens. You begin to notice synchronicities, subtle energies, connections you normally overlook. The hippocampus, guardian of memory, also responds to rhythm and sound. When harmonized by the sacred phrase, it can unlock not just personal memory, but what mystics describe as archetypal memory, ancestral, collective, even cosmic. Then there is the pineal gland, long associated with the third eye. Biochemically, it regulates melatonin and circadian rhythms. Esoterically, it is a sensor of inner light. Frequencies spoken in sacred phrases stimulate it, producing visions, insights, and altered states of consciousness. These effects are not fantasy. Neuroscientists measuring brain waves during mantra chanting find transitions into gamma states associated with heightened awareness and integration. The heart, too, begins to entrain with the brain, producing coherence that feels like deep peace or bliss. This is not suggestion or belief, it is resonance. The body is an instrument, and when the sacred phrase is spoken, the entire instrument vibrates differently. But the mechanics go deeper than biology. To understand why the sacred phrase works, you must see yourself not only as flesh and neurons, but as fields of energy. Every tradition mapped these fields. The yogis described chakras, spinning vortices aligned with the spine, each responding to particular syllables. The Taoists spoke of dantians, energy centers that store and circulate qi. Kabbalists mapped the Sephiroth, each sphere a level of consciousness that could be activated. Though the maps differ, the principle is the same. Human beings are layered with energy structures that vibrate. The sacred phrase is the master frequency, the sound that resonates across all layers simultaneously, harmonizing them into a single field. You have felt echoes of this in ordinary life. Think of how a piece of music can move you to tears without a single word. The melody bypasses intellect and touches your core. or how chanting in a cathedral can send chills through your spine even if you don't understand the language. Vibration does not need permission from logic. It speaks directly to the body and soul. The sacred phrase is like that, except infinitely more precise. It is tuned not for entertainment, but for activation. When spoken, the phrase vibrates the air in your lungs, the bones of your skull, the fluids of your brain. But it also vibrates the subtle layers of your being, layers science has barely begun to measure. Healers who work with energy describe it as a signature frequency, a sound that reorganizes the aura, dissolving blockages and opening pathways. Mystics describe it as a key that aligns you with the music of the spheres. The cosmic harmony Pythagoras spoke of, where the movement of planets itself was understood as a grand symphony. To utter the sacred phrase is to step into that cosmic choir, to recognize that you are not separate but an instrument within the orchestra of creation. What happens in the moment the phrase is spoken correctly? Reports from initiates across cultures converge. Time seems to slow or dissolve. The ordinary sense of self melts, replaced by vast presence. Colors appear more vivid, sounds sharper, as though reality itself has become more alive. For some, visions arise geometric patterns of light, archetypal figures, landscapes of radiant beauty. For others, there is simply silence, profound and infinite, as if all noise has been erased and only stillness remains. The experiences differ, but the essence is the same. The door of the inner temple swings open. Yet this is only the beginning. The phrase is not meant to be spoken once and discarded. It is a practice, a rhythm, a way of attuning again and again. Each repetition deepens the resonance, carving new pathways in the brain, strengthening new circuits of energy. At first, the effects may be subtle, a slight clarity, a feeling of calm. Over time, they accumulate until they reshape your entire orientation to life. You begin to notice patterns in chaos, meaning where there was randomness, purpose, where there was despair. This is not imagination. It is the perception of the inner temple, which sees differently than the ordinary mind. There is a story told among Sufi mystics of a seeker who traveled to every master, asking for the secret word. Each one gave him fragments, syllables, instructions. He grew frustrated, believing they were withholding. At last, in exhaustion, he sat in silence. And in that silence, the phrase rose within him, unbidden, as though it had been waiting all along. He realized that the masters had not withheld. They had guided him to the only place the word could be found within. This story captures the paradox. The sacred phrase is spoken externally, yes, but its true source is internal. To say it is to recognize what has always been resonating in you. The most powerful aspect of this practice is that it bypasses belief. You do not have to convince yourself. You do not have to accept doctrines or theories. The phrase either resonates or it does not. And when it does, the effect is undeniable. This is why the ancients could pass it across cultures without translation. The sound mattered more than the language. The vibration mattered more than the meaning. Meaning is for the mind. Vibration is for the temple. And the temple does not lie. What is perhaps most remarkable is that once the inner temple begins to open, the phrase itself changes. At first you speak it, later you hear it, as though it is being spoken through you. Some mystics describe it as a current of sound that never stops, the unstruck sound the Upanishads mention, a cosmic vibration underlying all creation. The spoken phrase is simply the doorway into recognizing that vibration, which has been resonating since the beginning of time. Once you hear it, even in silence, you are never the same. And so the mechanics of the sacred phrase are both simple and profound. It is sound, yes, but it is also alignment. It is resonance, but also recognition. Biologically, it reshapes the brain. Emotionally, it harmonizes the heart. Energetically, it clears and empowers the subtle body. Spiritually, it opens the temple and reveals what has always been within. That is why it is called sacred. Not because it belongs to a religion, but because it touches the deepest reality of who you are. The opening of the inner temple is not a single moment, but a gradual journey, a rhythm of unveiling and deepening. Those who embark on this path often describe it as a series of thresholds, At first, the sacred phrase feels like a gentle breeze clearing the dust of the mind. Old anxieties soften, and a sense of clarity appears, as though clouds have parted to reveal a hidden sky. Life itself seems lighter, as though the phrase carries an invisible fragrance that lingers even after the sound fades. But the deeper one goes, the more one realizes that the temple does not only contain light, it contains everything. It contains radiance and shadow alike. Why shadows? Because every temple has corners that have been ignored, places where the lamps have not yet reached. The sacred phrase, by its very nature, illuminates. And illumination reveals not only beauty, but also what has long been hidden. Within the inner temple lie memories you buried, emotions you suppressed, fears you denied. These are the neglected altars, waiting patiently for your attention. When the phrase is spoken sincerely, they rise to the surface. Some seekers expect bliss and are unsettled when pain emerges. Yet this is not a mistake. It is part of the cleansing. The phrase does not create shadows, it uncovers them so they may finally be faced, healed, and integrated. Many mystics compared this stage of the journey to fire. Fire illuminates, but it also burns. It destroys impurities while revealing what is indestructible. Alchemists called this the fire of transformation, and they encoded it in their symbols of crucibles and flames. The sacred phrase is such a fire. It sears away false identities, consumes illusions, and strips you bare until only the essence remains. This can be frightening, because it challenges the ego that clings to its roles and masks. But beyond the fear lies freedom. The fire of the phrase leaves you purified, renewed, luminous in a way you could never have imagined. One of the most important truths about this process is that it is not a shortcut. It is not a tool to bypass the human experience or to escape life's challenges. On the contrary, it makes you feel life more deeply. With the temple open, joy is brighter, sorrow is sharper, love is richer. Some seekers misunderstand spirituality as a way to numb themselves, to hover above the mess of being human. But the sacred phrase teaches otherwise. Life itself is the sacred ground. Every laughter and every tear is an altar in the temple. To speak the phrase is to consecrate all of it, not to reject it. As this practice deepens, a kind of sanctuary grows within. Imagine carrying a hidden chamber in your heart, a place of stillness that no storm can penetrate. When the outer world erupts in chaos, when conflict rages, when loss arrives, when circumstances overwhelm, you can return to the phrase. In an instant, the doors of the temple open, and you step into peace. This does not mean the outer situation disappears. Bills still need to be paid, bodies still age, challenges still unfold, but you meet them from the sanctuary, and that changes everything. You act not from panic, but from clarity, not from fear, but from presence. This is the gift of the phrase. It does not erase reality, but it transforms how you move within it. The world is full of testimonies to this power. A prisoner of war once described how he survived years of isolation by repeating a single syllable until it became a companion, a guardian that kept him sane. A mother who lost her child spoke of how the phrase carried her through grief, not by taking the pain away, but by giving her strength to transmute it into compassion for others. A monk facing terminal illness recounted how, with each repetition, fear dissolved into serenity, until he could face death as though it were another doorway. These are not myths. They are evidence of what happens when the temple is opened. And yet, survival is only the beginning. Beyond resilience lies something even more profound: awakening. As the resonance of the phrase deepens, it begins to dissolve the boundary between self and world. You feel yourself connected to the tree outside your window, to the river flowing miles away, to the stars shimmering across the night sky. The temple expands until it contains not only you, but the whole cosmos. This is what the mystics meant when they spoke of union. It is not an abstract theory. It is a direct experience of being one note in a cosmic symphony, inseparable from all others. In this state, loneliness disappears. The gnawing anxiety that you are separate, isolated, cut off it vanishes. The compulsion to strive, to prove yourself, to defend your identity fades away. What remains is presence. You live not to attain, but to express. Not to conquer, but to harmonize. Every action becomes infused with meaning, because you know it is part of the greater resonance. The sacred phrase does not grant you power in the sense of domination. It grants you alignment. And alignment is the greatest power of all. This awakening does not make you immune to life's difficulties. Illness still visits, mistakes still happen, losses still wound. But everything is reframed. Pain is not a punishment, but a teacher. Challenges are not obstacles, but initiations. Even death itself is no longer an enemy, but another transformation. When you live from the temple, you see that everything belongs. Everything has its place in the greater harmony. This does not mean passivity. It means participation with awareness, responding rather than reacting, creating rather than consuming. The beauty of this path is its simplicity. There are no gates guarded by authorities, no esoteric codes you must decipher, no distant mountain you must climb. The temple is here, inside you. The phrase is here, waiting on your breath. All that is required is sincerity, patience, and willingness to return to it again and again. In a culture obsessed with complexity, with external achievement and endless seeking, this simplicity is revolutionary. It reminds you that the treasure is not elsewhere but here. The elders of many traditions hinted at this. The kingdom of heaven is within. Tat twamasi, you are that. Know thyself, and you will know the universe. These were not metaphors but invitations. The sacred phrase is the key that turns the lock of these teachings. To speak it is to embody them, to see that the temple has always been open and the light has always been shining. The journey is not about acquiring something new, but about remembering what was never lost. As you contemplate this, consider also the collective dimension. Just as one instrument can tune an orchestra, so one person aligned with the sacred phrase can influence those around them. A single candle does not diminish its flame by lighting others. It multiplies the light. In the same way, when you live from the resonance of the phrase, your presence alone becomes a tuning fork. People around you feel calmer, clearer, more centered, even if they cannot explain why. This is not magic, but resonance. Your inner temple radiates outward, creating coherence in the field you share with others. Now imagine not one person, but many. Imagine a family living in resonance, a community, a culture. The ripple would be immeasurable. This is why the guardians of the phrase preserved it for centuries, even in secrecy. They knew that a time would come when humanity would need not individual awakening alone, but collective harmony. That time is now. We live in an age of noise, distraction, fragmentation. The inner temple is needed more than ever. The sacred phrase is not only a personal key, but a collective medicine, a resonance capable of guiding us through the chaos of our age. It reminds us of what we have forgotten, that beneath all division, there is one harmony. Beneath all fear, there is one love. Beneath all noise, there is one sound. The phrase does not belong to the past. It belongs to this moment, to you, to all who are ready to listen. And as the story continues, we will move from the personal temple into the collective temple, exploring how the sacred phrase is not just about individual transformation, but about a shift in the resonance of humanity itself. That shift is already beginning. When the sacred phrase enters an individual life, it awakens a personal temple. It stirs the sleeping chambers of memory, lights lanterns in forgotten corridors, and reveals the architecture of one's inner sanctum. But there is a second movement, one that is even more mysterious, and perhaps more powerful. What happens when not one, but many individuals begin to awaken at the same time? What happens when the phrase, like a spark, leaps across hearts, igniting more and more temples until their glow becomes collective? That is when the story of the phrase leaves the realm of the private seeker and begins shaping the destiny of communities, of cultures, of humanity itself. To open one temple is a miracle. to open many at once is a revolution. Throughout history, there have been whispers of such revolutions. They rarely began in palaces or seats of power. Instead, they arose in caves, in hidden groves, in secret chambers where groups of seekers would gather to breathe and chant as one. They understood something modern people are only beginning to rediscover. That vibration magnifies in unison. A single voice can open a doorway. 100 voices speaking the same phrase at the same rhythm do not merely open doorways, they create a field, a resonance chamber in which reality itself bends toward coherence. Think of how sound already works in our daily life. A lone violin is haunting. But when joined by others in an orchestra, the vibration swells into something that fills entire halls and moves entire audiences. The sacred phrase is not simply a word. It is a living note. When spoken together, it becomes a symphony. Historical accounts confirm this. Ancient Egyptian initiates described entire chambers vibrating with light when groups repeated a single phrase in resonance with the pyramid's geometry. Tibetan chronicles tell of monks chanting mantras until the air grew so charged that lamps flickered without oil. In Greece, Pythagorean circles practiced toning exercises, aligning voices until they felt lifted beyond the body. Even in Christian tradition, the Gregorian chants that still echo through cathedrals were not meant to entertain but to create resonance, to dissolve the separation between singer and listener, between human and divine. These were rehearsals for the collective temple. In science, often the reluctant companion of mysticism has begun to catch up. Researchers studying choirs found that when singers chant in harmony, their heartbeats synchronize. Others measured brain activity and discovered that collective chanting produces coherence across participants' neural rhythms. What was once dismissed as poetry now appears measurable. People can literally tune themselves to one another through sound. The sacred phrase takes this principle further. It not only synchronizes the outer rhythms of breath and heart, but calls forth the deeper rhythm of spirit, the one hidden beneath thought, beneath language, beneath fear. Look at how deeply this longing for resonance already lives within us. Across time, the human spirit has gathered around rhythm and song, as if instinctively remembering its original language. Movements have risen on melodies before they had manifestos. Crowds of protesters, voices entwined in a single chant, discover a courage far greater than their numbers. Soldiers marching to a single drumbeat feel fear dissolve as their hearts synchronize to one pulse. Even in vast stadiums, when thousands of strangers lift the same refrain, something larger stirs a wave of energy that transcends individuality. We have always known this mystery, though we rarely name it. Yet the sacred phrase speaks to a higher octave of that same force, not born from defiance or spectacle, but from alignment, remembrance, and the awakening of the collective temple that sleeps within us all. Imagine then the possibility of communities awakening together. Imagine not just one person learning to listen to their inner temple, but entire families, circles of friends, even cities beginning to vibrate with the same resonance. Conflicts that once felt immovable could soften. Decisions could be guided by clarity rather than manipulation. Even the physical environment could begin to shift, for resonance does not stop at human bodies. It ripples outward, touching plants, animals, even the structures we build. In such a world, temples would not be confined to stone buildings or hidden shrines. The collective temple would be everywhere, woven invisibly into daily life. And yet, as always, there is shadow. Just as the phrase can awaken truth in an individual, it can be twisted in groups. History is equally full of moments where chants became weapons. War cries, propaganda slogans, mass rallies, where resonance was manipulated not for awakening, but for control. This is the double edge of vibration. It amplifies what is placed within it. When fear or hatred is woven into a phrase, it spreads quickly, pulling masses into destructive coherence. This is why the guardians of the sacred phrase were careful. They understood that collective resonance is like fire. It can warm and illuminate, or it can burn and destroy. The difference lies in intention, in humility, in remembering that the temple does not belong to any one person, leader, or ideology. It belongs to the source that breathed the first phrase into existence. Without that remembrance, resonance becomes manipulation. With it, resonance becomes liberation. There is an old story, half legend, half historical account about a city that was spared destruction not by armies, but by sound. Invaders had surrounded its walls, supplies dwindled, fear spread. But within the city, a small group gathered each dawn and dusk to speak the sacred phrase in unison. They did not ask for victory. They did not curse their enemies. They simply entered resonance and held it as a field over their community. Days turned to weeks. For reasons history never fully explained, the invaders eventually withdrew without battle. To outsiders, it looked like chance. To those within, it was the collective temple at work. Modern people may dismiss such stories as myth, but even our world has glimpses of similar phenomena. Studies of mass meditation events have reported measurable reductions in crime or violence in surrounding areas. Whether or not one accepts every detail, the pattern is suggestive. Resonance influences reality. The collective temple is not metaphorical. It is causal. Think for a moment of humanity as a single body. Each individual is a cell. Each community, an organ. For much of history, this body has been sick, its cells in conflict, its organs failing to communicate. But when individuals open their temples, they become healthy cells. And when enough cells align, the body begins to heal. The sacred phrase, spoken together, is like the heartbeat of this healing body. It restores rhythm where chaos once reigned. We are right now at a threshold where this healing is possible. For centuries, the phrase has been guarded in fragments, known to mystics, whispered in cloisters, hinted at in scripture. But those who preserved it knew this time would come a time when the world's noise would reach unbearable levels, when humanity would be fractured by endless distraction and fear. They knew that only resonance could cut through the noise. And so the phrase has resurfaced, not for the few, but for the many. The collective temple does not require everyone to believe the same things or follow the same practices. It requires only willingness. Willingness to pause, to speak the phrase, to let resonance do its work. Willingness to trust that when enough voices align, reality itself begins to shift. You may think, but I am only one person. What difference can I make? Yet every resonance begins with one note. A single violin tuning itself can pull the rest of the orchestra into harmony. A single flame can light 1,000 others without diminishing. When you speak the phrase, you are not alone. You are joining a chorus that stretches across continents and centuries. A chorus that grows stronger with each voice that remembers. Perhaps this is why, in so many traditions, seekers were taught to gather at dawn or dusk. Not because those hours were magical in themselves, but because they connected them to unseen others doing the same across the world. Every sunrise, every sunset, became a global chorus. The collective temple is not somewhere you go. It is something you enter, something you carry, something you share. And once entered, it changes everything. The way you look at others, the way you listen, the way you make choices. Suddenly, life is no longer about survival or status. It is about resonance. You begin to sense the hidden music beneath ordinary events, the rhythm guiding even the most chaotic situations. And when you fall out of resonance, the phrase is there to guide you back, not just for yourself, but for all who share the temple with you. The personal journey of the phrase was the seed. The collective journey is the flowering. And this flowering is not in the distant future. It has already begun. The collective temple is vast, but it is not the final destination. It is a threshold, an invitation into something even more profound, the recognition that the temple was never out there at all. It was always both within you and around you, both personal and collective, both human and cosmic. The sacred phrase is the key that reveals this paradox, not as an intellectual idea, but as a lived truth. When you speak it, you stand at the intersection of the finite and the infinite. You feel the pulse of your own heart, and at the same time, the pulse of a universe too vast to comprehend. And in that moment, you understand you were never separate from the source of the phrase. You were always part of it. This realization is what mystics across cultures hinted at with their most poetic language. The Hermetic masters spoke of the all that is both hidden and revealed. The Vedic sages described Nada Brahma, the idea that sound is God. That vibration itself is creation. Christian mystics wrote of the word that was with God and was God. All of these were reflections of the same secret. Vibration is the bridge. The sacred phrase is not a tool to get somewhere else. It is a reminder of where you already are. But here lies the paradox of teaching it openly. To some, the phrase will sound too simple. To others, too strange. Many will dismiss it as mere wordplay, and that is as it should be. For the phrase does not reveal its power to the skeptical mind alone. It reveals itself through practice. Only when spoken, when breathed, when carried into silence and repetition, does its resonance awaken. This is why the guardians of the phrase always emphasized humility. To treat it as a curiosity or a quick fix is to miss its essence. To approach it as a sacred doorway is to find it opening of its own accord. Yet humility does not mean secrecy any longer. We live in a time when hidden knowledge must emerge. The danger of misuse is real, but the danger of silence is greater. A world drowning in division, fear, and noise cannot afford to lose the medicine of resonance. The phrase is surfacing now because humanity is ready, or at least ready enough. And readiness does not mean perfection. It means willingness to try, to stumble, to begin again, to listen. So what does it mean to live with the sacred phrase? At first, it may be a practice of minutes whispered in the morning, spoken before sleep, repeated when anxiety rises. Over time, it becomes less about when you speak it and more about how it speaks through you. You find its rhythm weaving into your walk, its resonance coloring your tone, its silence holding you even when your mouth is closed. The temple begins to travel with you. Wherever you go, others sense it. They may not know why, but they feel calmer in your presence. They feel seen, heard, aligned. That is the phrase speaking through you. As more individuals carry the phrase, the collective field strengthens. This does not mean everyone must chant together at the same time, though that magnifies the effect. It means that each person who enters resonance contributes to a global chorus. Like tuning forks, we vibrate into one another. A single person holding resonance can influence a room. A small group can influence a neighborhood. Imagine thousands. Imagine millions. This is why so many traditions spoke of a tipping point. The Buddhists called it the 100th monkey phenomenon. Systems theorists call it critical mass. Mystics call it the dawn. Different words, same truth. When enough temples are open, the entire landscape shifts. What once seemed immovable collapses. What once seemed impossible becomes obvious. This is not wishful thinking. It is how resonance works. Patterns hold until a stronger pattern arrives. The sacred phrase is such a pattern. And yet, one must be honest about the resistance it will provoke. Not everyone welcomes resonance. Institutions built on fear, manipulation, and division cannot survive in its presence. Just as a shadow cannot survive in light, so too will structures of control struggle against the collective temple. This is why, historically, those who carried the phrase were persecuted, silenced, or ridiculed. And this is why today, even as science validates the power of resonance, there are forces eager to reduce it to novelty or strip it of its transformative depth. But you need not fear this resistance. The phrase is not fragile. It has survived empires, inquisitions, and centuries of concealment. It is stronger than any opposition because it is rooted in the very fabric of existence. When you speak it, you join a lineage of resilience. You become a link in the unbroken chain that has carried it from the dawn of human memory to this moment. Perhaps the most profound gift of the phrase is not even its power to heal or awaken, but its power to remind you of who you truly are. Beneath the roles you play, beneath the noise of thought, beneath even the rise and fall of breath, there is a vibration that has never ceased. It is the same vibration that moves galaxies, that stirs oceans, that grows trees. The phrase is your invitation to hear it again, to recognize that the temple was never opened because it was never closed. It was only forgotten. And so we arrive at the threshold of choice. The story has shown you the lineage, the science, the practice, the collective. But none of it matters unless you speak the phrase yourself, unless you allow its resonance to touch your life directly. Stories can inspire, knowledge can clarify, but only practice transforms. So here is the call. Find a quiet place, even for a few breaths. Speak the phrase softly, aloud or within, and let it settle. Do not strain, do not analyze. Simply listen. Notice how your body responds, how the air shifts, how silence feels afterward. Do this daily, and you will see. The temple will open not with lightning and thunder, but with a gentle, unmistakable unfolding. And once it opens, you will never again forget the door exists. If you wish, share it, teach it, gather with others and explore the collective temple. But always return to humility. Remember, the phrase is not a possession, it is a gift. It does not belong to any religion, group, or teacher. It belongs to life itself. In honoring it, you honor the source of all. And if you feel resistance, know that is natural. The old patterns will protest. The noise of the world will try to drown it. But the phrase is patient. It has waited thousands of years. It will wait for you. Return to it as often as you need. Each time you do, you strengthen not only yourself, but the chorus of all who remember. One day, perhaps sooner than we think, enough of us will carry it together. And on that day, the world will not change because someone forced it to. It will change because the collective temple will have opened. And in its resonance, the old structures will simply no longer fit. They will dissolve, as naturally as shadows dissolve in sunlight. Until then, the task is simple. Speak, listen, remember. The sacred phrase that opens your inner temple is not just a secret from the past. It is the seed of the future. And now, it has reached you. The choice is yours. So, if this message has stirred something in you, don't let it fade as just another idea. Begin today. Try the phrase for yourself. Share it with those who are ready. And if you wish to go deeper, to walk this path with others, then join us. Subscribe, connect, step into the chorus. Together we can keep this resonance alive, not as memory, but as living practice. For the temple is waiting, the phrase is waiting, and the moment is now. If this message stirred something in you, don't let it end here. Begin the practice. Speak the phrase. Feel its resonance for yourself. And when you're ready to go deeper, join this growing circle of seekers. Subscribe, share this with someone who's searching, and step into the chorus that is already awakening across the world. The temple is waiting, the phrase is waiting, and the time to open the door is now.